Is there scientific evidence for the Christian worldview, or do scientific advances demonstrate that we live in a universe that lacks meaning and lacks purpose? I'm joined today by Dr. Francisco Delgado, who is a physician who specializes in the treatment of infectious diseases and a Christian to help unpack these questions. Paco, in previous episodes, we talked about the idea that there's scientific evidence for God's existence, and with that, evidence for the Christian worldview that flows out of scientific advance. But yet, when I present scientific evidence to people that are skeptics for the Christian faith, oftentimes the response I get is, well, if there's so much compelling scientific evidence for God's existence, then why are so many people in the scientific community skeptics? Why are so many people in the scientific community resistant to that idea? So let me ask you, why do you think people in the scientific community are hesitant to embrace the idea of a creator?
Yes. I'm not sure I would be able to speak for every single person that rejects it from that standpoint. I can tell you a little bit of what I have found in the people in the environment that I am being with. Probably some of the resistance to accept Christianity from a scientific perspective, first of all, would be a predetermination to say that there's nothing like a supernatural. That would be probably one, which is, I think you call it philosophical naturalism. Mm-hmm. The second one, and probably the most important one, is we do not know what is behind every person's life, that they may be pushing away the truth willingly or maybe unwillingly, and to bring forth the exposition of the truth of the gospel so that it can speak for itself. Yeah. Those would be my two main areas where I would be thinking.
You know, it's interesting. You mentioned this idea that scientists have this predisposition to reject the supernatural. When I've engaged scientists, many times I've found that they haven't even really thought about spiritual questions or deep philosophical questions because they're so caught up in their work as scientists or as physicians. And so they just identify themselves as atheists by default. They just have this idea that, well, I'm a man or a woman of science, so therefore I must be an atheist. Have you ever found that level of, or that shallowness to that whole question?
Yes, Fuzz. And, it probably shows up in an idea that I see, for example, in many of the residents in the hospital that I work with. It is probably a lack of exposure during the medical school years into these deep questions of life. And to me, if we could put a little bit more of philosophy into the sciences, we actually probably would be better scientists and better physicians. And we would have a more rounded approach to the issues that are in our medical field.
Yeah. Now, in terms of the second reason that you give, people just seem to whether on their own volition or even unintentionally just want to suppress the truth. Unpack that a little bit more for me. What do you think in a person's life experience causes that unwillingness to hear the gospel, or to hear the gospel as being something other than good news?
Probably because we believe that what we have right now is the best that we will ever have, and that we do not think that there is anything beyond the natural world that could bring us. That makes us probably live for the present, live for you only live once, live for I just want to be happy, which in the end they are not fulfilling pursuits. So what is really behind every person that makes them block the gospel? It's hard to tell. But I have found that as I ask specific people those questions, I find avenues in which I can come back and tell them, listen, have you considered this? Which has opened actually several avenues to give them the gospel from a point of view that they hadn't considered before.